while I've been able to stumble across the name and get that out to you, he's like truly impressive background. And we've had like a great set of speakers all the way through. And Mehdi is our like final speaker. This is the this is like the climax of the whole program here. And I'm just going to give you a couple points from his bio. Of course, he's a serial entrepreneur. He's an advisor on various boards and things like that. He's a founder of Combustion Networks. He's been building companies for quite some time. He was a senior executive at CafePress, growing the company to the point of the $130 million mark. He was an executive at Intellisync, which was acquired by Nokia for $450 million. He sits on numerous boards that includes FaceTime, Pbworks, and Fotomoto. He has a degree from both Stanford and from Berkeley. And so what else can you say? Yeah. I got to tell you, when you drop all the rest of it, we're actually all friends, okay? Like in terms of schools. Now, no, we are. We truly are. Okay, and so I'm really happy to. First of all, the boot camp has been, for me, it's been like a really good experience, and I'm really happy to. This is my kind of like final introduction of the boot camp to introduce someone to you. So I'm really glad that it's Mehdi. Thank you.
No, thank you
for coming.
So I'm pretty excited. I actually sat in those chairs, I don't know, 20 plus years ago, and I'm just going to tell a story. I don't have slides or anything. I came back to Berkeley about a month and a half ago after I sold my last company. I'm going to talk about my history and how I ended up here, but I came back and said I'd love to come back and visit the campus. And I tell you, I'm so impressed. When I was going to Berkeley, the notion of entrepreneurship, product design, building companies was just foreign to people. And when out of Stanford, I started my first startup, I got a call from my dad who said, "You're crazy." I had a job at IBM offered to me before I even finished Stanford. And I started a medical informatics company out of Stanford. And my dad called me probably 100 times. Every other month said, "You need to go work for IBM. You need to go for IBM." This is 24 years ago. And every one of my mentors and professors at the time, I think Professor Zadeh, Katz, there were a bunch of them. They all said, "Now go work for IBM."
He's still here, by the way.
What was that?
Katz, Randy Katz.
He's here.
Still
yeah,
here,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
So anyway, I started doing startups many years ago and fell in love with it for mostly the main reason was solving problems was something that I was passionate about. And you don't get to solve problems as you do anywhere else except for startups. I mean, how many people are going to pay you money and time to figure out interesting, juicy problems to solve? So that's how I got into it. But before that, I want to sort of say I was a geek. When I was about 7 or 9 years old, I told my dad, I was born in Iran. I told my dad, "I'm going to Berkeley." And my dad said, "Where?" And I said, "Berkeley." And he looked at me and he was like, "Okay, well, I guess we're going to Berkeley." So I came out here, applied probably 12 times as a foreign student before I got in, and loved the academic environment and the professors and everything I learned. And I'm still a geek at heart. So what I do and what I love doing is building teams and building products. And I learned a lot from making a lot of mistakes. That's what you do. So one of the reasons people ask me all the time, why can't we build Silicon Valley somewhere else? I have friends in Paris and in Brazil, in Costa Rica, and everywhere, and they always ask me, so why can't we do this in other countries as effectively? And the main reason you get what you get here, away from the fact that you got talent and Stanford and Berkeley and venture and so on, the main reason is people accept failure here, where in other cultures they don't. So the first thing you learn as a startup is you have to learn to lose and make mistakes and learn very quickly from those mistakes. We have that culture here. And it's amazing to watch in this class, because 20 years ago when you went to class, failure and sort of making mistakes was not acceptable. In fact, the academic environment was very rigid, right? People told you there's one way to do X, there's one way to do Y. It was repetition. So as an entrepreneur, even at Stanford, when I was in the sort of master's program, they gave me a problem to solve. And the professor was very specific about how to solve it. He said, you go home and you do this and you do that. And I went home. And I was a pretty shrewd guy. I was making a lot of money on the side. I didn't have the time to do the assignment the way he wanted me to do. And it was a Postscript problem. I don't know how many of you guys know Postscript as a language. OK. So he wanted us to solve a very big sort of Postscript issue. This is 20 years ago on computers that took very long time to do Postscript computation, display analysis. So I wanted to do it quickly, get it out of my way, and then go make money on a consulting gig. So I found a way to, how many of you know that Postscript is a bidirectional protocol? Raise your hand. So you can actually program a Postscript printer. So I figured a way to program the Postscript printers in the medical informatics department at Stanford to solve the problem for me. So I wrote a program. I downloaded it. You can actually send the Postscript program to the printer. And by sending an instruction to the printer that doesn't print but puts it into a listening mode, the printer becomes a computer that does high-speed Postscript computation for you. So I figured a way to turn all the printers into sort of my slaves. I would send instruction to the Postscript printers, and they would do the Postscript computation for me, send it back to me. And then and this is now, it's OK because many years passed. I also figured a way to actually get the Postscript printers to send me every job they got. So as my professors were printing on the printers, I would know what they were printing. So I sort of learned very quickly to get all the tests, all the results, and I was doing my homework, and my professor was shocked, like, how's he doing the homework so fast? Then at the time this was happening, there was a company that formed. It was called Go. I don't know, many of you guys don't remember, but there was a whole sort of revolution around pen computing and mobile devices way before iPhone. Almost all those companies failed. By the way, there was probably $100 million put into mobile devices before iPhone, even more than that, just trying to create that sort of device. One of the companies was Go, and Kaplan was the founder of Go computing. And Bill Campbell was involved. Bill Campbell, who is now on the board of Apple. All these guys were trying to figure out this mobile computing. And then they were looking for someone to be able to solve the Postscript problem on the mobile device. So I got that consulting job, too, at the same time. And they were paying me, at the time, a lot of money to figure out how to do Postscript display on the device. And that was all being done by the Stanford printers, by the way. So Stanford was buying these printers, and I was getting all the computational speed. But the story is, I learned very early on in school that there are many ways to solve problems. And often the way to solve them is not what people think it is. So if everybody around you says, I'm an expert in this, run away. Experts tend to be very, very narrow-minded about a field. They've been spending so much time in it, they can't break the paradigm. So one of the things you should learn coming out of this program, which I'm actually pretty impressed. I've been talking to the staff here, and I feel like they intentionally are trying to bring innovation into the conversation and not force a repetitive paradigm of learning that sort of says there's one way to solve a problem. And that's actually the core of success in startups, is to be able to step away and think clearly about a problem in a different way that others haven't thought about. And it requires a couple of things. One is you have to be open-minded. Two is you have to surround yourself with people who are from different disciplines and bring alternative mindsets. And that was also very impressive to see. So just my observation, past 2 hours I've been sitting here, you guys are so far ahead of where we were 20 years ago. It's just incredible. I mean, you articulate, you have team members with different backgrounds, different countries, different cultures. You guys understand some of the basics of how to view a problem, like is this a real problem? Who's the customer? You know, what's the value to the customer? How do we solve it? Many sort of aspects of what we had to learn the hard way many years ago. Anyway, so I started a company out of Stanford in medical informatics, sold that to a pharma company, then moved on to do a bunch of different things. I worked on enterprise software, security. I built a company called CafePress. How many of you guys have gotten a T-shirt from CafePress? Maybe not in this generation, but
I gotta get one.
You know, that was a very fun deal where we enabled people to put their design up, and we would print it on anything they wanted: T-shirts, mugs, hats. And what was fun about it, we had no limits. You could put anything up. And I ran that company and grew it to about 130 million, even public in 2009. But one of the fun things was it was during the election, and we would get all these T-shirts that said, "I hate Obama, I love Bush." And again, the learning curve was amazing. I found this guy who was making $1 million on our site. So I called him up. His name was Jim Gamble. And I said, "Jim, what are you doing? How do you make $1 million on the site?" And he was an anthropologist who quit his job and started designing T-shirts. And he said, "You know what I do is I go to the right-wing campaigns and sell 'I hate Obama' T-shirts. Then the next day I go to the left-wing campaign offices and I sell 'I hate Bush' T-shirts." And he was doing this across the U.S. and every one of those sides of the political spectrum saw this guy as on their side. They would say, "Jim, I hate this Obama. He's going to take this country the wrong way." And he would come with a whole bunch of T-shirts. Like, "Yeah, buy one of these. I hate Obama." So he made $1 million business out of just doing this. It was very fun to watch. One of the things that I learned out of that deal, just listening to customers, is how much creativity exists out there. So when I joined the team to help them grow the company, there were two guys in a garage, and they were doing about $100,000 I think a year or something, very small numbers. And we thought that if you got 1 million designs on our site, it was a big outcome. So we were aiming to get 1 million designs and designers on our site. 4 years later, when the company reached 130 million in revenue, we were getting 3 million designs a day from our community. I mean, I couldn't keep the servers up, the number of designs that were coming in. And one of the things that was shocking it was the amount of creativity that exists out there. And I don't think anybody quite understands how much potential there is in the crowd out there, how much intelligence people have once you empower them. So after that learning, I sort of started this theme of investments. I've invested in lots of companies where we enable the end consumer to do something with their skill. And you're seeing the result of that. It's amazing how many companies are now, Uber is an example of enabling you to use your skill for driving. There's HomeJoy. How many of you guys have used HomeJoy? Yeah, HomeJoy is letting you do, take your skills and shop it around. There are sites that are letting you cook at home. So really, it's amazing potential out there once you enable consumers to take what they know and have and apply it to the market and bring it out. So my take is entrepreneurship is beginning. So it's the early stage of it. And you guys are, in some ways, I'm sort of envious because when we started, a lot of the things we had to build were foundational. We had to build a network. The first company I started out of Berkeley was called Metaphor Computer Systems. And if you know that name, you're definitely over 40 years old. But Metaphor Computer Systems, we were trying to solve a problem for Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola. And the problem was they wanted to know how they distributed their products across the US. This is in 1989. And in order to answer that question of how do my products get distributed across the US, we had to design this system for them and to ask a simple question of distribution, charts, which is what Tableau does. How many of you know Tableau today? Yeah, so you can put up numbers and Tableau charts out things for you. So Coca-Cola wanted to have that in 1989. And we started writing code. We finished in 1991. IBM bought the company for $120 million. And We had to write TCP/IP stack because a robust one didn't exist. We had to write a windowing system. We had to write mouse drivers, keyboard drivers, databases, graphic libraries. We wrote everything from scratch, and it took us about 3.5 years before IBM bought the company. Looking at where you guys are, the speed of innovation is incredible now, because so many of these layers have been solved or are being solved really rapidly. As an example, I just invested in a healthcare company, and we had an issue, which is there are too many wearable devices being bought by people. So we started supporting 5, then we got to 10. And it reminded me of my days at Intellisync, which is another company I was running. And we had the same problem where every week there was a cell phone coming out and we couldn't support them. So back 15 years ago, when we had that problem, I had to hire 300 people in Romania to code 2 cell phones. Now, in 2014, I have a team of 2 people doing this healthcare deal called RxMatch. And when the wearable device list got to 120, instead of hiring people, we called a company in Palo Alto called Human API. How many of you guys heard of Human API? So 2 guys in Palo Alto have created a company called Human API, and they're integrating to all devices as a layer. You pay them 30 cents a user per month. They get you every data out of every device you have ever seen released out there, including your medical record, including the weight scale at your house. So you can now tap into all of that data with 30 cents a month, which is like incredible. I mean, the amount of innovation that's coming out and the speed at which it's coming out makes it a lot easier to be an entrepreneur now. It takes less money, it takes less time. You can test faster, you can fail faster, you can learn where the market is. So it's an exciting time to be where you guys are. And you know, I think with the training you're getting and the infrastructure that you have, you couldn't do better. And great things are going to happen. I mean, I can't wait. I think we are just in the beginning of this wave of innovation that's going to hit us. Everything from you know, 3-dimensional printers that are just advancing incredibly fast to print-on-demand clothing. How many of you guys seen print-on-demand clothing? There's now a printer that can print your clothes. So you can actually put the cell phone down, walk around. It looks at the dimensions of your body, and a printer can print a cloth designed to your body within like 20 minutes, which would radically change the whole sort of apparel industry.
That used to be called a tailor. That used to be called a tailor. It
used to be called tailor, yeah. So it's fascinating. It's a fascinating time to be in your shoes. I encourage you to go out there, do what you're doing here, which is find really a couple of things to watch out for. First, choose a very good problem to solve. Very important where you are. You have to realize that the most valuable thing in the world that you have is your time and your CPU, your IQ. Money is very cheap. So I don't know how many people would tell you that. Money is very cheap. To buy your time, you know, for me right now, to give $100,000 to one of you guys and say do something, the money is cheap. Your time is very expensive. So, you know, there are very few people on the planet with your capability to solve problems, and they're hard to find. Very hard to find. I mean, the demand for problem solvers on a global basis is huge, right? So be very careful about what problem you attack. Don't let people get you involved with problems that are not worth solving. So identify the problem carefully. Once you identify it, build a really good team around you. And there are 2 factors to the team. There's who you surround yourself as the team you're playing in, and then who do you have as your mentors, coaches, people around you. Pay a lot of attention. And now I'm going to say something. Is this being videotaped? Okay. Oh, no, it's not. Okay. So I'm going to say something that most of my venture friends won't like. So be careful about who you surround yourself as mentors. A lot of people in the industry that hover around the valley have never built anything. And you know, they're great financial guys, they're great attorneys, but it's like going to a World Cup game and having your coach be someone who never played soccer. So be very careful who you surround yourself with in terms of coaches and mentors, because building companies it looks easy from the outside. It's extremely complex. It's like so many factors have to come together. You're defining a market, customers, pricing, marketing strategies, scale issues, team building. There's so many things you have to solve. Surround yourself with people who have played the game before, because the things they see, you won't see, and it's good to have that insight as to how to deal with those issues. So be careful about the problem, build a team around you, and remember that money is actually money is cheap. So, if the problem is interesting and your approach to the problem is interesting, you will get funding. That's not the hard part. Building the company at scale is hard. That's, the first 5 to 10 million of revenue is fairly easy. By the time you get to 50 million, you're in the class of probably a handful, less than 1,000 people, even in the Valley, have really built a $50+ million company. I want to be quite careful about that. A lot of people have worked for very large companies. So you can find people who have worked for eBay and Yahoo and so on, but very few people have built from scratch a $50+ million company. It gets very hard once you cross 50 to 100 million to scale. And it's a very different skill set than 0 to 50 or 0 to 100 million. So be careful about how you sort of look at those issues. But other than that, have fun. I mean, it's a fantastic thing to do. I tell you, I was lucky enough to fall into it. I've been doing it for 20+ years. I still work with entrepreneurs and fund companies and run things, and nothing comes close to it. I mean, from an intellectual standpoint, you're so engaged. You're so, and in minute-by-minute basis, you're learning. And nothing in life, I think, gives you the satisfaction of learning. It's like being in school all the time. You're constantly being challenged and learning things, which is awesome. So any questions out there? Anybody? Pretty quiet group.
Let me start with something. Actually, I think what's the most challenging experience you've ever had in terms of moving or investing in companies?
Investing in companies, the biggest challenge in investing is there are too many interesting ideas, and time becomes your limit, right? You can. So there are two types of investors out there. You have to be careful. There are the investors who, are passive investors. They manage a fund, and they get 100 million and they put money into a bunch of different deals. Passive investors are very different than active investors. I'm an active investor. Active investors, I only put money into things that I am engaged with. So I don't put money into things and walk away. So if you're a passive investor, you're effectively a financial manager. And maybe a lot of you guys have taken classes here that talk about venture financing and funds of funds and so on. But most venture funds, they invest institutional money as passive investors. And a typical partner has about 50 million they have to invest. They have to choose how to distribute that 50 million across deals. It's a very engineered model, right? You get to invest about 5 to 10 million. You get to invest about 2 to 3 deals a year. So it really becomes a mathematics of how many of these deals and which one do you choose. If you're an active investor like me, it becomes a time issue. You can only really sit on about 4 boards as an active investor. I think that's practical. If people are doing more than 4, it's really hard to engage the problem. The problem, the space you're going into requires intellectual attention. You have to understand the dynamic of the team, their capabilities, what they're building, competitive differentiation, how the market views it, who the initial customers are. There's so many things to solve. You can't do more than 4. That's from an investing standpoint the challenge. Now, those are not the biggest thing you lose sleep over. The biggest thing you lose sleep over in a deal really often comes down to the team. The team issue, if you've identified the market is real and big, all the issues come down to execution. And it becomes a team dynamic. Do you have the right VP of product? Do you have the right VP of sales? Do you have the right board? Those are things you don't have to deal with, but the minute you have to deal with, it actually becomes very costly. Meaning, the minute you find out you don't have the right VP of sales, you lost a year of execution. A year of execution in a company often is a couple $1 million of losses, right? Yeah, you have to take time to reboot, and time is money, and creates complexity. Or when you get into bad board dynamic, I give an example again. I can't name names, but I just in the past 5 years, I'm an angel investor, which means I invest early, and then venture guys come after me. So in one of the deals that I invested early, we reached about 60 million in revenue, and we got an offer for 120 million. And I wanted to sell. So I looked at the market and I said, we need to get out of this market now. And the board, which was a very, very friendly board, everybody liked each other. We went drinking. We were watching the World Cup together. Suddenly, the board was not friendly. One of the investors, one of the venture guys, was a new partner at a firm. A new partner at a firm gets about a year to 2 to prove themselves. So they get to put money into different deals. If the deals do well, they become a partner. If the deals don't do well, they get fired. To get fired as a venture partner is not a very good outcome because companies don't want to hire you. As a CEO, I don't look for talent among venture capitalists, right? You don't find your VP of sales and products in a venture capitalist. So venture guys who don't do well and get fired are in pretty big trouble, right? They want to land in a soft, cushy job. And the dynamic of the board became one in which this guy, who was a new venture, didn't want to get out at a 2x. So twice revenue is not a good outcome in a market, right? Because you're in a public market where people are valuing companies at 5 to 10 times revenue. So if you go back to institutional partners and say, I sold the company at 2 times revenue, not a good outcome. So he started rejecting the deal. The long story to bring it back as to what the problems you face, that deal disappeared, and 6 months later, we sold the company for 60 million. We lost 60 million in 6 months because the guy couldn't make up his mind. Now, so just to put it in perspective, if you as a founder, if you as a team worked 3 or 4 years to build that company, you lost 60 million. To the board member who is a partner in a firm, at the end of the day, they have less than 1% ownership of your company, right? Because you sold equity to the firm has to split it between the partners and the limited partners, and the guy on your board really typically gets less than 1% of your company. So you have to remember that investors on your board have far less skin in your deal than you have in your own deal, right? So when those things happen, the cost to you is huge, right? 60 million to the founders is a lot of money. 60 million to a sort of a venture partner who's sitting on the board is maybe, at the end of the day, $60,000, or maybe, $600,000. I don't know what percent. Yeah. So you have to be careful about those dynamics. And again, if you surround yourself with people who have done this, they will tell you that. At that moment, they'll tell you, aspects of startups are like smoking. You don't see the consequence until like 2 years down the line. And again, if you haven't played the game, you don't see the consequence. If you have, the person next to you would tell you like, hey, this decision is going to come to haunt you, not now, but 12 months out, 18 months out, 24 months out. And that sort of dependency is hard to see if you don't have the experience.
So I wanted to hear a lot about your early days. I'm 22 and I'm kind of thinking about like the startup career for me. I was trying to maybe learn a lesson from your days back when you were 21 and thinking about going to be. I guess Mark Zuckerberg didn't exist, right? So yeah, I just want to hear about that.
It's a very good question. Actually, we had, Erlog and I had a discussion about this. When I interview people as an investor, I'm constantly making a decision, are you an entrepreneur or not? Because I just wrote a check yesterday for $100,000 to a guy. And as you're sitting there, you're like, okay, are you the guy who's going to work on making this happen? You're making that judgment call constantly in your head. And we were sitting in his office, and he started outlining personality traits of entrepreneurs. And I was laughing because what I do intuitively, he's sort of captured in a, and this is actually a talent that is important. You have to, sometimes, the intuition is great, but you have to be able to make that judgment repeatedly. So there are traits that make you an entrepreneur, and there are traits that make you a good team member of a startup. So my comment first is, being a founder is very unique. 15% of people I've met can be founders. And it requires that it's a combination of a bunch of things, but you have to have extreme confidence. You have to have this attitude of, you're going to hear so many negatives from people. You're going to hit so many walls. You have to have that persistence to say, I'm going to crush through these things. I'm going to solve these things. And there's a sort of a nutty craziness to it. It's like going, as an analogy, it's like going to a bar asking 100 people, and they all say, no, I don't want to date you. And they're like, oh, I'm going to ask the 100 for first person. And they're like, I'm so good looking, they're going to go out with me today. Like, you have to have some sort of a delusional mind at some level that you're going to figure this thing out, and persistence. So 15% of people can really be founder type. Now, that doesn't mean startups are the wrong choice. I have to say, I think my personal thing is increasingly startups are the place to be, especially for the quality of people like yourself who are coming out of Berkeley and Stanford, and mostly because they're really changing the world around you. And these companies are doing amazingly interesting stuff. It would be really boring to go get a job right now at IBM or HP or VMware or name the companies. It's going to kill you intellectually. You're going to sit there and you're going to kill yourself after a while because it's just a boring job at your level. Yeah. So and I know a lot of my friends are at HP and VMware, so on. But the reason. So my comment is, if you're not a founder type, then try to go join a team, a startup, and judge the company you're joining by the quality of the people. Because at your age, it's hard for you to make a judgment based on the quality of the market. You have to make that judgment based on the quality of the team. So it's like again, the sport analogy. You're young enough, you're joining a professional club. If I'm going to join a professional club in soccer, I'm going to go to Barcelona. I'm going to go to Real Madrid. I'm going to go to Atletico. Yeah, I'm going to go somewhere where I learn something from these guys. So my suggestion is find that team that has a reputation and join them, because they would teach you more than any large company would at this point. The rate of learning in startups is so fast. You learn so quickly on so many fronts. It's just incredible. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah. Go ahead. Technical expertise. Oh, absolutely. I honestly have a hard time investing or dealing with people who technically cannot solve things. And it's probably my prejudice. There are probably deals where but name me a company that was built by someone who technically was not savvy. I mean, eBay, Pierre was technically, he coded, Mark Zuckerberg coded. The Google guys are technical. I have a hard time. You can build interesting companies. Again, not everybody has to be technical. So, you can have a group of people who are marketing, sales, and so on. But the core of startups is you have to, from a technology perspective, be good at whatever that technology is. If you're building the device, you have to build a really good device. You can't go. You have to solve some core IP technical problem. And it could be that your technical expertise is design. It might be that your technical expertise is building devices. It might be that your technical expertise is figuring out the route for foods, you know. Or I mean, it doesn't matter what that is, but you have to, from a technology perspective, know something that's differentiating you. Otherwise, it's easy to compete with you. I mean, you're not solving anything juicy and interesting. I mean, I still code just because, just as a discipline. Yesterday, one of my startups that I'm funding came into my office, and we spent an hour solving DNS issues. And I tell you, it was so much fun. I'm like sitting on a computer trying to solve DNS issues. And I'm sort of proud of that because I feel like, okay, you can't, you know, as an investor, you can't fool me right now because I'm still technically savvy enough that you can't come in front of me, put a bunch of PowerPoints. Just give you another analogy. I just went to the demo day Y Combinator 2 days ago. There were about, I think, 200 investors in that room. I would say probably half of those investors are not technical. They're just coming to the demo day because they heard it's a great place to invest. And they're spreading their money in these deals without any concept of how hard or easy it is to do. I mean, when you're technical, like I look at a team, in 2 minutes I'm making a judgment call. Can you, 4 years, outperform people? Not can you put up a PowerPoint. Putting up a PowerPoint and looking good is not that hard. So a lot of the deals getting done in the Valley right now, people are putting money into deals that don't have a core strength. And when the time gets hard, it's hard to differentiate yourself. I mean, the early stage putting in PowerPoint is easy, but like 4 years from now, still out competing your competitors by innovating is hard. You have to be very good at technology. You can't become a big, you know. When I joined CafePress, there were 13 companies doing print on demand. 13. We went public, 1. The rest you don't even know, right? Zazzle you might know. Who knows Zazzle? Okay. Zazzle was a KP company that didn't go public. And the reason they didn't was because we kicked their butt through technology. We scaled much faster than they did. It was all technology. It was not marketing. Right. Any other questions?
Hold on. Coming.
Okay, I have a question about the open source. What do you, can you share about what in your view, the pro and cons about the open source? When you develop something, like spend like 18 months, develop a product, and should you open source or not?
You know, the market as a whole does not care. Your end customers typically don't care. There are very few market segments where the customer cares about open source. So I would say if you're in one of those segments, like for example, universities tend to want to buy software that's open source. So if you're in the educational market and you're developing an LMS, then you want to be in an open source market. You have to listen to your customer. If the customers value open source, then you should follow that strategy. If your customers don't care, it's a platform decision. It's a back office decision, not a customer-facing decision. And as a back office decision, then it really becomes your VP of engineering decision, which is, do I get more value out of my engineering team? Does it enable me to recruit better, retain better, move faster if I open source my code? So you first have to decide if it's a customer-facing issue, you're doing it for marketing, go-to-market reasons, or you're doing it for back office implementation reasons. If it's a market-facing, then you have to do it because the market wants you to. In certain markets like education again. But if it's not, then really you have to leave it to your VP of engineering and say, is it a retention issue? Is it a speed issue? Why are you doing it? But fundamentally, it is not. It is a tool decision, not a market decision.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Are you going to finish us off in flowery fashion?
Okay, so my question was kind of a running theme of this whole boot camp for us has been listen to your customer, which is kind of like the Steve Blank approach, like customer development and all that. And on the other hand is like the design Steve Jobs of like ignore everybody, I know best, give the customer what they want before they know they want it. And so I was kind of curious your thoughts on that.
You're going to get me in trouble because when I was running CafePress, Steve was on my board.
Which one?
Blank. And we disagreed, let's put that. So no, I come from the camp where interesting ideas don't come from your customers. Let's put it that way. So big ideas often disrupt markets. And disruption is not going to come out of the mouth of your customer. Just, it won't. Customers, so I want to be very careful. So there are innovators in the market. So when you go to market, there are often, in any market, there are individuals who are ahead of the market. And they have customized a solution. So if you're smart, you can go to market, watch the early innovators and see what they're doing. They're effectively trying to solve the problems without buying. And they often give you they give you pointers as to, but it's really hard for them, right? Like one of the companies that I built was FaceTime, which Apple bought, FaceTime Communications. This was 15 years ago. I sort of started saying communications go online, instant messaging. Everybody looked at me and said, well, what the hell are you talking about, instant messaging? Everybody's on the phone. And we incubated out of IBP. We started doing it. And it was very funny. When we started bridging instant messaging networks and allowed people to talk to each other through presence, you guys remember you could see if somebody's online, ping them and start talking. And we got this working over cell phones. And I was walking around the US saying, hey, presence and instant messaging is going to dominate communication. People all looked at me as like, this guy is nuts. Everybody's on the phone. What the hell he's talking about? And then I found this CIO at Citigroup who took me to the side room and says, my traders are doing this. Don't tell anybody. And all his traders were instant messaging trades. And the reason they were doing that was because SEC was watching everything else. SEC was watching email, phone, and the traders were like on the instant messaging AOL, short Cisco. I'm about to dump 10,000 shares. Which, by the way, is funny because we saw that behavior and then we implemented a system. The company's called Actions now. That's monitoring for SEC communication instant messaging networks. But it's very interesting. So when I saw this guy, like he's an innovator, right? He's a guy who realizes I have a problem. My problem is traders want to talk to each other. SEC doesn't let me. Everything is being watched. There's this thing called AOL instant messaging. Isn't that a great way to like get around the system, right? So if you watch early innovators in the market, you see them doing what's coming. But that's very hard, very difficult to walk up to someone and say, what do you think the future of communication should be? And you expect the guy to tell you where he's so much into the now and the immediate problem. So for incremental innovation, listening to your customer is very important. So if you want to build the next Salesforce tool, listen to your customer. If you want to build a better food delivery, listen to your customers. These are not that these are great ideas, but these are incremental ideas. If you want to create a whole new, if you want to change how we interface with a computer through virtual reality or voice, the customers are going to tell you that. No way. Which customer? Who are you going to talk to? You have to have some sort of gut instinctive sort of belief that this is a better way to do the world to work, right? And you have to go implement it. And you are, at that point, you're a preacher. My wife always asked me, early days why I was doing what I was doing. I was like, as a founder, you become a preacher. You have to create a following. People are like, this is the way to go. And people have to believe in you, right? You have to sort of, with a passion, advocate that position. Otherwise, it won't happen.
I think that's just a wonderful way to stop.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.